Hey, I'm Jeff and welcome back to another video. Propagating aroids such as philodendrons, syngoniums, and anthuriums can be quite stressful at times, especially if the plant is expensive or it holds sentimental value to you. Now, I've had cuttings rot in both the soil and water propagation methods, but air layering is a very simple, easy, effective method of essentially growing roots on the plant before you ever make the cut. Propagation by any method is never a guarantee, but I like this method compared to water because whenever you take a water propagation, so you cut the plant, put it in water, I'm always stressing until you see those roots. The only downside to this method is just making sure that you keep the growing medium relatively damp while it is rooting, and also it takes a number of weeks before you start to see roots. If you do the water propagation method, you are going to spend the same amount of time with the root development as well. In my experience, this method has a little bit of an easier transition into soil compared to say like a water propagated cutting, which has water roots. It'll have a little bit of a shock when you pot it up into a soil mix. I find that you don't really have that, especially when you are rooting it with soil. So the main propagation mediums are sphagnum moss or soil, and there is a number of different ways you can do the air layering method. I have these fancy little pods. They are a two-piece. So this detaches right here. There's sphagnum moss inside here, so essentially it grows a root ball in this little canister. You can also use just a nursery or a plastic nursery cup. You can cut the side of the container, open it up, and basically just surround the stem like that. I've done this in the past. Or you can simply use a Ziploc bag like I've done with this plant right here. The two plants that I'm propagating today, this one is the philodendron Lynette. It has these beautiful, longer, almost like a rippled style leaf. And then this one is the philodendron Leynamii. I'm not too sure how to pronounce it, but I'll leave the names up on the screen. This one is more of like a bush style. And this one here is a crawling philodendron, and you can see it's kind of spilled over the edge of the pot. Now the process is extremely simple. You simply pick out a plant. I'm just going to use my tetrasperma here as an example. Now typically when you air layer a plant, you want it on the node just because that's where the roots are going to pop out of. So essentially you will want to cut this leaf off as it's probably going to rot anyways. So you can place your propagation container on that node without the leaf. Next, you just want to pick out your propagation medium. I like to use sphagnum moss for these propagations just because they have more of a moisture retentive quality compared to soil. So it'll stay damp for longer. So with this method, the pre-casted propagation container, you simply just add either soil or sphagnum moss into the container like this. There's actually a leafless node right there. So all you do is wrap this around the stem like that, close up the container, and then just let it root over the next few weeks. Although these pods make it super easy, it's not going to be effective for all plants. You might have to become a little creative, like this one right here. There's no way that you could get this pod around a stem like that, so that's why I had to use the Ziploc bag. Sometimes it can be a little bit more tricky. I just used a zip tie at the top here to keep it closed. You want to make sure that the top is open here as well for airflow. This gives me access to water the moss as well, but check out these roots in the bag. So that is why this is a super effective method of rooting plants when they are still attached to the stem. Now for the Lynette, I'll be honest, I did let this get dry a number of times. It's basically over in the corner of my basement, and yeah, I definitely let it get dry too many times, especially when I went on vacation. I came back and the whole plant was pretty droopy. So I'm not too sure what the roots are going to look like. I haven't opened this up in a number of weeks, so here goes nothing. And we definitely have some roots, but it is a dry root ball. So I'm going to take this over to the shower here, and I'm going to kind of rehydrate this moss. It looks like a little globe. That's pretty cool. The roots still look pretty good. They're not the white, healthy roots that I want to see. They're a little bit more on the brown side, but they're not rotten or anything like that. I'm actually going to cut the stem before I take it over to rehydrate the moss. Just taking a, well, it's not really a clean blade, but I did sanitize it with rubbing alcohol. So all I'm going to do is just take the blade and then slice, make a nice clean cut on the stem like that. And now you have a separate plant which you can pot up in soil. Now I'm just placing this in a container of filter tap water so I can rehydrate the moss. Now you can keep it in the moss, or you can remove the moss around the roots and pot it up in some soil. I'm not too sure which one I'm going to do yet. I may keep it in the moss and try an entirely moss grown plant, and then I'll keep this one as almost like a comparison, one grown in soil and one in moss. That might be an interesting little experiment. Now you don't have to worry about this cut portion right here, because with most aeroids, whenever you cut the top off a plant, it's going to activate nodes lower in the stem. So this will produce a new growth point from the closest node, and sometimes it'll branch out in or activate multiple nodes. So this will regrow. You don't have to worry about this portion dying or anything like that. Now chopping this one makes me pretty nervous just because it is a fairly rare plant. Even though it has roots, this one definitely makes me nervous. So I'm going to start off by cutting this little zip tie, taking it out of the bag, and then slicing it up, making the cut. Another crazy thing about this plant is I got it off of a plant sale group, and I think I paid like $20 or $30 for it. So kind of a crazy deal, I think. Okay, so I'm just getting the clippers in there and then cut that off. Now, the nice thing with the bag is you can just literally just rip it open. I'm just grabbing a tray just so I can catch all that moss. There. And just pull that down. And now you have a fully rooted cutting. Now I'm just gonna break that or loosen it up a little bit. Look at these roots. Look at these crazy roots. That is insane. It worked out so well. Now this makes me happy. This makes me feel comfortable with propagating this plant. I do have a rectangular pot which I want to place this in because this is a crawling philodendron. It's going to creep along the bottom of the pot. It'll never be a climbing philodendron. So I bought a longer pot for this one. It even has a bunch of little secondary roots. And I can't get over the color. Like, the roots are bright red, which is crazy. You see there's just little tiny secondary roots. So beautiful, beautiful root system on this. I'm gonna take all the moss off. So that is fantastic. I'm super happy with how these roots look. And they're even fuzzy. It's got a little fuzzy section. So it looks like it's rooted on a number of nodes. So all these little lines, whoops, all these little lines here, these are nodes. So it looks like it's got a rooted node here, one right there, and some roots there. So I could essentially cut this up multiple times to get multiple separate plants. But what I think I'm going to do is cut it maybe right here, and then that should activate nodes lower in the pot, and hopefully it will produce multiple plants and I can propagate it again. I actually took this over to the shower, sprayed off as much moss as I could, as I don't want there to be any big clumps on it when rooting it in the soil, just because moss obviously holds on to moisture and I don't want these staying wet. Otherwise you'll lead to some root rot. So they're nice and clean. This thing looks absolutely amazing. So now it's time to slice it up. And I did sanitize the blade again. So like I said, I think I'm gonna cut somewhere around right here. And you wanna make sure that you have a very sharp blade, and you wanna make as clean of a cut as you possibly can. So I'm gonna cut right at that node. Again, watching my fingers, I'm just holding on to this stem, and I'm just going to rock this back and forth until it gets through the thick stem like that. Just a nice clean cut. Now before I pot this up, I want to make sure that I seal this cut end just so it doesn't introduce any bacteria or fungal issues so that it causes any rot to the plant. Some people use cinnamon. I've seen others use candle wax. I think for this I'm just going to use some rooting hormone, and then I'm just going to put a little bit on my finger and then just kind of rub it into the cut end. So I'm just going to actually dump a little bit on there just so it's like this. And then you can just rub it, just sealing up that cut portion there. You don't want to use too much, but I'm just something like that, just to lightly coat the fresh cut, and then that should seal up that cut nicely when you plant it in a pot of soil. This is the pot that I'm going to use, and it's perfect for crawling philodendrons or any crawling plants. It does have an insert, so this is classified as a self-watering pot. There's the inside, the insert goes like that. It has a little watering port here as well, and a gauge to tell you the level of water in the bottom. I'm not going to keep any standing water in the bottom, but I will plant it something like this. I'm going to butt this up right up against kind of the end, and then as it continues to grow, it can just grow along the pot. So these are perfect for crawling philodendrons or any crawling plant. I've just added some soil in the pot, and I am using Molly's aeroid mix from VeryPlants. This is a well-draining soil. You can see I've basically leveled it off to the top here. This is where I'm going to plant the cutting, and then I'll just kind of backfill with some soil. Just make sure that after you take the cut, you pot this up right away. So seal up that cut and put it in a container of soil or whatever medium that you're using, and then make sure you give it some water, because you don't want these roots to dry out, otherwise your plant's a goner. So all I'm going to do is kind of hold this in place. I don't know if you can see me or not. Grab some soil and just start filling it around the roots. Now you want to make sure that the roots as well as the bottom portion of the stem are in contact with the soil. So just dumping that in. So I'm just putting soil underneath the plant now just to help keep it stable. I might actually have to maybe use a little bit of a support stake. I've never had to support a crawling philodendron before. This one is just so top heavy. It's got such large leaves. I might have to add a little support stake just in here just to kind of prop it up a little bit. Okay, so this is just temporary until all those roots kind of dig in the soil and everything just settles in the pot. So now I'm going to take this over and give it a good thorough watering. Okay, so it's actually quite stable in the pot now. Now that it's been well watered and the soil has settled. So I'm going to set this aside, let it continue to grow, and I'll check back for some updates down the road. Now I got to get back to the Lynette here. It's been soaking for probably about 10 minutes. It's a nice soggy root ball. Now I'm going to find a pot to pot this up in some sphagnum moss, and we'll see how this does over the next few months. Now to keep it real simple, I just found a spare nursery pot. Fits in this little container right there, and I'm not going to even unravel these roots. I'm just going to let them continue to, they'll unravel themselves. I'm just reusing the sphagnum moss from the philodendron Leynamii, and just going to plunk this in, put some moss in. I don't think I've ever grown a plant in moss long term, so kind of curious to see how this philodendron does just in straight moss. I'm typically not a fan of moss, but I've been slowly changing my mind on the benefits of moss as this channel continues to grow, and just from experiments that I've done. So okay, something super simple like that, done. So I think that's going to be pretty much it for this video. I hope you enjoyed this content. My videos always tend to be a little bit longer than I plan, but I hope you found this useful and applicable to your houseplant. So here is the Lynette. I don't know why I call it Lynette, but anyways, I think that's going to be pretty much it. Thanks for watching. Take care, everyone. Bye.